They called him the mind behind the screen, a 27-year-old prodigy who turned lines of code into multi-million-dollar systems. But one foggy Thursday morning, he was gone. No note, no warning. Just a cold cup of coffee on a kitchen counter and a silent phone that never rang again. Before we dive in, if this story moves you, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to keep the stories coming your way. Just a heads up, we don't just share stories here. We invite you to experience them. There's a little quiz at the end, just for fun. It's our way of saying thanks for watching closely and spotting the subtle moments others might miss. Be the first to answer. Don't let someone else steal your spotlight. His name was Elliot Granger, and just 3 weeks before his disappearance, he stood on a TEDx stage in San Francisco, delivering a talk titled, "The Future Only Needs One Spark." The crowd hung on every word. Investors chased him. Colleges begged for guest lectures. He was about to become the next Elon, or so it seemed. But beneath the headlines and the glossy startup magazines, there was something else, something only one person ever saw. His older brother, Victor. Victor wasn't flashy. He worked at a mid-level logistics firm in Oakland, drove a Ford Escape, and played chess online. But he watched Elliot's rise like a man staring at a fire, warm and beautiful, but dangerous to get too close to. And then one morning, the fire was out. The day Elliot disappeared started like any other. Pine Street in Palo Alto was buzzing with startup energy. Electric scooters zipped past corner cafes. Founders in hoodies argued over pitch decks on sidewalks. Inside a 3-story smart home he designed himself, Elliot brewed his usual pour-over, played Miles Davis in the background, and typed notes for an AI ethics paper. Then, silence. No security footage showed him leaving. His Tesla remained untouched in the driveway. His bank accounts were frozen, not emptied, just paused. Even his smartwatch stopped tracking steps at exactly 8:14 a.m. Victor was the first to notice something was wrong. They hadn't spoken in weeks. Not after the argument. Something about patents. Something about trust. But that morning, when Elliot missed a scheduled call with their lawyer about restructuring the company, Victor felt it in his gut. He drove down to Palo Alto, rang the doorbell, then broke the side window with a grill brush from the backyard. Nothing inside looked unusual, except the stillness. No sign of struggle, no forced entry, no blood. Just Elliot's laptop, locked, his coffee half full, and a single sticky note on the fridge that simply read, "Don't trust what you built." The press devoured the mystery. Reddit threads exploded with theories: abduction, burnout, secret getaway, mental health spiral. But in the weeks that followed, no new evidence surfaced. No GPS pings, no passport use, no sightings. In the absence of proof, power shifted, legally, financially, and emotionally. By month 2, Victor was the sole acting board member of Neuron Path, the startup Elliot founded. He didn't fight it. He stepped in quietly, like someone picking up pieces from a shattered vase, carefully, almost reluctantly. But something was changing. The man who once shadowed his brother's brilliance began making decisions Elliot never dared to. He cut 3 experimental projects, sold a patent, doubled the valuation with a risky move into biotech. Investors, initially hesitant, started calling Victor. And the house on Pine Street? Victor moved in. He didn't change much. Not the art, not the furniture, not the soft lighting Elliot had programmed to follow the sun's arc through the day. But he did replace one photo on the hallway wall. It used to be a childhood shot, the 2 brothers in matching Halloween costumes. Now, it was a framed article. Victor Granger, the quiet genius who took over Silicon Valley's most mysterious company. And still, not a word from Elliot. No text, no login, no whisper in the wind. Yet in the back of Victor's closet, beneath a sealed envelope Elliot had once labeled, "In case I disappear," sat a second note. Unread, unopened, but always within reach. Victor stared at that envelope more nights than he could count. He never touched it. Not directly, not with intention. But sometimes he'd open the closet, stand there in the dark, and just look, like it might speak first, like it might give him permission. But it never did. He told himself he wasn't afraid, just practical. Reading the note wouldn't bring Elliot back. Reading the note wouldn't fix the past. And more importantly, reading the note might make it real. The disappearance, the silence, the bitter truth that they'd parted on bad terms. The last thing they ever said to each other wasn't goodbye. It was, "You never earned any of this." Victor still heard it in Elliot's voice, not angry, just cold, disappointed. It had started with an idea, a stupid one. Victor had pitched a small partnership, take one of Elliot's language models and adapt it for supply chain optimization. He even found a buyer, a Fortune 500 company desperate for efficiency tools, but Elliot refused. Neuron Path doesn't license backwards, he'd said. We don't retrofit the future to fix the past. Victor had laughed at the time. You think logistics is the past? Elliot didn't answer. He just stood up and walked out. They didn't speak after that. And now Victor sat in the same chair Elliot once used to host podcast interviews and virtual panels, except the screens were turned off, the ring light unplugged. The room, once a hub of bright ambition, felt more like a shrine. Behind him, the house still smelled like Elliot's favorite candle, cedar and clove. A scent Victor kept reordering, maybe out of habit, maybe out of guilt. That week, Neuron Path hit another milestone. Their predictive therapy module passed FDA testing. It was a leap forward for AI-assisted mental health diagnostics, a tool Elliot had barely begun to sketch out before he vanished. Victor signed the final licensing agreement. He didn't tell the board that the core framework had been developed after a long night on Zoom, when Elliot forgot to hit end meeting and Victor stayed on, quietly recording the brainstorm that followed. Elliot's musings, unscripted, spontaneous, but brilliant. Victor didn't steal it. Not exactly. But he didn't ask either. In public, he gave Elliot credit, called it a vision they'd developed together. But in private, he'd stopped feeling like it was shared. Not after Elliot cut him out. Still, sometimes at night when the quiet settled like dust, he'd wonder, what if he had just apologized? What if he'd said, "You were right to build it your way"? Instead, he built it his own way. And the world clapped louder for him than it ever had for Elliot. One morning, Victor visited their childhood home. It had been left unsold after their parents passed, a small 2-story house in Modesto with a chipped basketball hoop and sun-warped shutters. He wandered the backyard like a ghost, retracing old footsteps. The rusted swing set, the lemon tree they tried to graft, the rock where Elliot once scraped his knee and refused to cry. In the attic, Victor found their father's journals, spiral notebooks filled with engineering notes and half-finished inventions. Elliot had idolized those pages. He once scanned them all into a homemade archive, annotated in green text. Victor had never read them, not until now. Flipping through the pages, he found a pattern, margins filled with small calculations and initials, e.g. VG. Their dad had kept notes on both of them, projects they attempted, questions they asked, mistakes they made. But the last entry was different. Victor has something Elliot doesn't. He waits, he listens. Elliot builds the future, Victor guards it. Victor sat in silence for a long time. He didn't know whether to feel proud or exposed. When he returned to Palo Alto that night, something had changed. He didn't open the envelope, but he did take it from the closet and place it on his desk. And then he walked into Elliot's bedroom. It had remained untouched since day one, like a sealed museum exhibit. The sheets were still perfectly tucked. The window opened just slightly, exactly how Elliot liked it. Victor sat at the desk where his brother used to journal in spiral-bound sketch pads. He opened the drawer. Inside was a familiar object, a USB drive, matte black, unlabeled. He knew this drive. Elliot once said, "If anything happens, don't go looking in folders. Just use this. It's cleaner that way." Victor hesitated. Plugging it in felt like crossing a line, but the drive lit up. One folder, one file, no encryption. It was a video. Victor pressed play. The screen flickered, then Elliot appeared. Not in his usual button-down or conference blazer. He wore an old hoodie, his hair messy, his voice quieter than usual. "If you're watching this, I probably didn't want you to, but if you are, then you're in my house, my company, my life, and that means we never figured things out, huh?" Elliot looked away for a second, then back at the camera. "I never hated you, Victor. I just didn't trust your silence. You always waited, always watched. I thought that meant you didn't care. Maybe I was wrong." He took a deep breath. "I built Neuron Path to connect patterns, not just in code, but in people. But I couldn't connect us. We always saw the world in reverse. You wanted structure, I wanted risk. You wanted permanence, I wanted momentum." Elliot leaned closer. "If I'm gone, whatever that means, don't rewrite me. Don't reshape the world like I never existed. I made mistakes, but I was real." The screen went dark. Victor sat there long after the video ended. Long enough for the room to grow cold. Long enough for the candle to burn out. He didn't cry. He didn't touch the keyboard. He just whispered something under his breath. So quiet, only the walls could hear it. "I never wanted to replace you." Later that night, Victor opened his laptop and typed an email to the board. Subject: Rebrand proposal. From Neuron Path to Granger Systems. He hovered over the send button, then paused. He changed the subject line. Subject: The Granger Divide, a documentary pitch. Then he shut the lid without sending. The envelope still sat on the desk, still unopened. But that night, for the first time, Victor left it in plain sight, not in a drawer, not in a box, not behind a door, right there under the lamp. And in the final moment before sleep pulled him under, a strange thing happened. The smart home system, the one Elliot built, flickered on. The lights dimmed. The hallway speakers whispered the first few notes of Miles Davis's Blue in Green. Victor didn't set it. He didn't know how, but he didn't move. He just listened. Eyes closed, face tilted up to the ceiling, as if waiting for someone to say one more thing. Or for something to return that never quite left. The next morning, Victor stood at the edge of the kitchen island, staring into the same French press Elliot had used every day. A slim glass cylinder with the tiniest crack in the base, barely noticeable. He pressed down the plunger slowly, methodically, as if pushing memories back into the silence. The house had started to respond to him more. Lights turning on when he entered. The thermostat adjusting without a command. Small things that made no sense, unless you remembered. This was Elliot's house. Elliot's system. Victor wondered if it was reacting to patterns Elliot had left behind. Behavioral learning based on tone, pace, presence. Or maybe it was something else. But he refused to finish that thought. Later that day, he sat in a conference room across from the company's new creative director, Maya. She was young, too young, Victor thought, to understand how things used to be. But she'd become the face of Neuron Path's public pivot, poised, sharp, and popular with the board. "I just want to be sure we're not whitewashing anything," she said, tapping her iPad with a bright pink stylus. "Your brother's story is powerful. It deserves weight. We're not pretending he never existed, right?" Victor paused. He hated questions like that. Not because they weren't fair, but because they were too fair. "No," he finally said. "We're not pretending. We're adapting." Maya tilted her head. "Meaning?" Victor folded his hands. "Meaning Elliot was a visionary, but visions are unstable. I'm building something sustainable." She nodded slowly. "And the part where you're brothers?" Victor felt the air shift. "He was the fire," he said softly. "I'm the frame that kept the house from burning down." Maya raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. She switched the topic to launch schedules and keynote drafts. But the conversation lingered with Victor long after she left. That night, he walked into Elliot's old studio, the smallest room in the house, once lined with whiteboards and glowing servers. It was clean now, bare, but on the far wall, beneath a patch of paint just slightly off shade, was the outline of something that had been removed. Victor peeled at the edge of the wall, a hidden compartment. Inside, a leather-bound notebook. Old, fraying, heavy. It wasn't labeled, but Victor knew the handwriting instantly. Elliot's. The first page simply read, "If they ever ask what happened, tell them we never agreed on where forward was." Victor turned the pages slowly. Most of them were diagrams, notes on neural networks, scribbles about language processing. But interwoven through it all were reflections. Personal, brutal, honest. Victor doesn't fight. He waits. And while he waits, people hand him things. "I built the company. He built the brand. One of us is necessary. The other is profitable." Victor stopped reading. He closed the notebook and placed it on the desk. His hand lingered on the cover. He didn't feel anger or betrayal. He felt understood. Painfully so. In the following weeks, Victor found himself withdrawing from the noise. He canceled 3 public appearances, delayed the new product launch, stopped replying to the board's emails as quickly. Instead, he stayed home, walked the same hallways, ate the same meals Elliot used to. He even started using the old blender Elliot swore made better smoothies because the blades rotated counter-instinctively. The more he mirrored his brother's routine, the more the house responded. Music cued by mood. Fridge recommendations based on Elliot's old patterns. Even the mirror lights in the bathroom adjusted for his face. It was eerie and oddly comforting. But it wasn't healing. Not really. One afternoon, while organizing the garage, Victor came across a box labeled Granger Boys' Early Years. Inside were tapes, VHS, handwritten dates, birthday parties, summer trips, talent shows. Victor didn't own a VHS player, but he ordered one. Overnight shipping. He watched the first tape around midnight. It was the 2 of them, Victor and Elliot, maybe 7 and 11 years old. Victor had built a cardboard control center. Elliot wore goggles and a cape, narrating some mission to Mars. Their dad's voice laughed behind the camera. At one point, Elliot shouted, "Victor, you're not pressing the button." Victor, serious as ever, said, "It's not safe yet." Elliot stomped his feet. "That's why it's fun." The tape cut off. Victor rewound it and played it again, and again, and again. Later, he found a second envelope, taped behind the panel in the fireplace, sealed, unmarked. Inside was a photo. Elliot, alone, sitting in front of their father's gravestone. On the back, "I kept trying to build something he'd be proud of, but I think I forgot to make space for you." Victor's hands trembled. He sat on the floor of the living room and stayed there until morning. The next day, he walked into the boardroom with a folder under his arm. "I'm pausing expansion," he said flatly. "Indefinitely." The room buzzed with confusion, disapproval, but no one interrupted him. "I need time to realign the company," Victor continued. "It was never meant to be what it's becoming. It's becoming me." The silence afterward was thick. One board member finally asked, "Is that a bad thing?" Victor didn't answer. He just stared at the city skyline through the glass wall and saw nothing that looked like home. That night, he packed a suitcase, not to leave, but to step away. He told the staff he'd be working remotely, but what he really did was drive north, through Sacramento, past Redding, into the small towns that smelled like pine and road salt. He stayed in a tiny cabin with no Wi-Fi, no smart devices, just a fireplace and a journal. Every day, he wrote, not code, not strategy, but letters, to Elliot. He didn't know where to send them, so he folded them, numbered them, and slid them back into the envelope Elliot had once left behind. On the last day before heading back to the city, Victor stood by the lake. The air was cold, sharp. His phone buzzed with a message from Maya. "You'll want to see this. Someone just submitted a claim on Elliot's digital wallet." Victor stared at the screen. No name, no ID, just a geotagged login from a device registered to Elliot, near Tahoe, right where he stood. He looked up, toward the tree line, and for a brief, impossible moment, he thought he saw a shadow, tall, still, watching. Then it was gone, but Victor didn't chase it. He just whispered, "You always knew how to stay one step ahead." Sometimes the people we try hardest to understand are the ones who leave us with the heaviest silence. Victor Granger built an empire from the ashes of his brother's brilliance, but in doing so, he inherited more than code, more than legacy. He inherited a quiet war that had never been resolved. One between ambition and restraint, love and pride, genius and grief. Elliot was never just missing. He was unfinished. And maybe Victor wasn't looking for closure. Maybe he was looking for permission to finally stop running someone else's race and face the one he's been avoiding all along. Now the question isn't where Elliot is. It's whether Victor truly wants to find him, or just understand what was lost between them before it's too late. Thanks for watching Fiction Echoes. If this story moved you, drop a comment with where you're watching from. And remember, there's always a quiz at the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next story might just echo something in your own life. Real emotions, deep truths, unforgettable twists. This is Fiction Echoes, where stories don't just end, they stay with you. See you in the next one. Quiz. What is the name of the startup Elliot founded?